Welcome, everyone. I'd like to first acknowledge that we're on the unceded territory of the Cowichan people, and that in this room we have different views, different ways of expression, different emotional intensities, and different roads that lead to conclusions. May we combine clarity of mind with kindness of heart, and may we be impartial without bending to strong personalities. May we sacrifice self-interest for the good of the whole, and may we do our work with love and clarity of vision for the benefit of those that we represent. Thank you and welcome. It's our first meeting back from the holidays. And I'd like to officially call us to order. Approval, or do we have any late items? No?
Thank you, Mayor Staples. We do not have any late items.
Thank you. Approval of agenda, that the January 20th council agenda be approved is circulated. All right, any discussion? All those in favor? Adoption of minutes, that the minutes of December 12th, 2019 special council meeting be adopted as circulated. Mover, seconder, any discussion about the minutes? No? All of those in favor? Motion carries. December 16th, that the minutes of the December 16th, 2019 regular council meeting be adopted as circulated. Mover, seconder, any questions, omissions, anything? No? All those in favor? Motion carried. And we will move to our first delegation of the evening. And I'd like to welcome our MLA, Sonia Furstenau. We haven't spent enough time today together, and we still won't have after your presentation. But welcome.
All right, I'll just, how's that? All right. Well, thank you for welcoming me to your council, and also I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Cowichan territory. And I will start by saying I have had the delight to spend much of the day with Mayor Staples. We started out in the morning in the legislature, and then we met halfway through the day at our leadership meeting, and then here I am tonight. So it's been a great Duncan day. And I have notes, and Maeve's used to this, and so I'm going to ignore them. A couple of years ago, I was at a dinner in Vancouver, and I was seated at the table with some people from on Ottawa, and they were from Reconciliation Canada. And when I said that I was the MLA for Cowichan, they lit up, and they said, Cowichan, that's what we look to Cowichan as the model for reconciliation that's happening in Canada. And they specifically talked about the Cowichan Watershed Board and how that model of co-governance and working across local government and Cowichan tribes was something that they really hold up to as an example of reconciliation. And since then, I often have the experience of thinking that Cowichan exports a lot of really great things to the rest of Canada, and that we really should be incredibly proud of our community and what happens here. And even today, so Michelle and I were at the legislature for the Good Citizenship Awards, and it was Jack Hutton, who's the founder of Providence Farm, who is getting a Good Citizenship Award from the province. And if that's not an example of what we want to see in our communities, I can't think what could be. Here's a person who starts from a place of compassion and solutions and brings it together in a way that we can all recognize as being exactly what we want to see in our communities, which is recognizing everybody has a value, everybody has a place, and when people are held up and recognized for that value that they bring, they can thrive, and then we can all thrive together so wonderfully. And so I feel, Cowichan, all the time, we export what we do so well here, which is really coming together. And so one of the things that I wanted to update you on was, hi, Allison. Allison and I live on the same street, sorry. What I wanted to update you on was maybe, that how that plays out, what I see in the legislature. So we're almost at 3 years into, as of May, it will be 3 years since the last election. And you'll all remember in 2017 when everybody lit their hair on fire and said minority governments can't work and this can't be stable and it's all going to fall apart within 6 months and nothing's going to happen. And I think we can look at the last 2.5 years and see that a great deal has happened in British Columbia. And as always with any kind of government, there's always going to be more work. This is the thing that we recognize, is that our work will never be done, whether we're at municipal levels of government or federal or anything in between. The work will always continue. We'll accomplish one thing and then we turn our attention to the next. But a great deal has been accomplished since the 2017 election, province-wide. And also here in Cowichan, and we've celebrated a lot of big announcements. We've got, most recently, announcement of a new high school. We have the hospice. We have a hospital coming. These are great steps forward for our community and long overdue. What doesn't get seen a lot is the day-to-day operations inside the legislature, and what I see as having had a great impact, having a third party in the legislature and having a minority government, but just having a third party is that it's given space inside that building to let go of some of the old ways of being and to recognize that we can be more collaborative, we can be more inclusive, that we can actually make better decisions when we listen to each other a little bit more. And on the minutiae of the inner workings of the legislature really is the Legislative Assembly Management Committee, and I'm the House Leader for the third party. And the work that was done in 2019, there were more meetings of that committee of LAMC in 2019 than there had been in the previous 5 or 6 years put together. And as you're all aware, we were dealing with the fallout from some pretty shocking information that came out, and we've had resignation of the clerk and resignation of the sergeant-at-arms. But in the midst of that, this incredible all-party work has gone into developing policies and processes for that institution that will ensure that what happened, what unfolded, can't happen again. But even to take it further, and one of the things I'm most proud of is that we now have a respectful workplace policy in the BC legislature, which might sound a little paradoxical sometimes if you watch it from the outside. But this is incredible for me, the fact that everybody who works inside that legislature, whether it's a minister or whether it's an intern, is now operating under a respectful workplace policy. And soon we will be opening a respectful workplace office, which will mean that there are processes in place for if that policy isn't being followed, there will be ways to address those issues. And I can tell you that's long overdue, as we know in parliaments and legislatures across the country. This is work that's been happening there too, and the political culture hasn't been one that really engenders a lot of respectful workplace. But I see shifts happening down there, and I'm really heartened because the work that we all have to do, and when we talk about the work we were, the crises we're facing here in Cowichan with the drug use and the homelessness and the growing levels of violence and the challenges that the RCMP are having, we're not going to solve these by picking sides and being in opposition to each other. We're going to solve them by recognizing that we all have solutions to bring to the table and that we can bring these solutions together. And so decreasing partisanship at every level of government and decreasing it in the work that we do. I mean, I would say that, here in Duncan and here in Cowichan, partisanship is something that does not play into the equation when we're working. It never enters our minds. We are in service to our communities, and that is the work we're trying to do. And this is not about political ends. It is about what is the best we can do for our communities. And I think that, again, we should be proud of how we do that in Cowichan, and we should also know that that is something that we are sharing out more widely. And I'm really honored and proud to continue to be a representative of this community in the legislature, and I assure you I try to bring as much Cowichan as possible into the work I do every day. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions for me, happy to answer them.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan?
Thank you for the update, Sonia. Just a question on Mr. Weaver now being an independent.
Yeah.
Now, what I've basically heard is just what was sort of on the CBC radio, and so I guess I want to know, is he still feel that he's governed by the agreement that's been signed?
Yeah.
And well, I'll just let you answer.
Absolutely. So he stated that he intends very much to adhere to the confidence and supply agreement that was signed, and it was signed by all 44 of us, so all 41 members of the NDP caucus and the 3 members of the Greens. He is still a signatory to that, so what he has signed on to remains in effect, and he's indicated that that's his intention. As we've said, we support him in his decision to sit as an independent, given that he's facing health challenges in his family.
Any other questions from council? No? Thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
coming
much.
to visit with us tonight and your update. And next up is Drew Cooper, the Executive Director from the Cowichan Sportsplex. That was hard to say. Good night.
All right, all set? Thank you very much for the opportunity to meet with you folks tonight. And I've been at the Sportsplex now for about a year and a half, and it's become one of my favorite things to do is to talk about what's going on here. So recently we applied for a grant. We were denied, and the information we got is that there wasn't enough information. So my goal here today is just to provide some more info for you folks, so that hopefully down the road we can have a conversation and delve into this a little bit and see how we can get the City of Duncan involved. As most of you are probably aware, the Sportsplex started about almost 25 years ago now, when a group of dedicated volunteers decided that they wanted a track and field facility. And the why is the big, I think, is important in this case. They didn't do it because they wanted their kids to get scholarships. They didn't do it for fame or glory. They did it because they recognized that things like a track provide safe opportunities for people to go out there and be physically active. Things like the track provide fundamental movement skills for kids so that they'll participate in more sport and physical activity and stay healthy. The bottom line for this initiative, and what continues to be the mantra, is this connection between what the Sportsplex is about and the health of this community. And this is what we end up with today. And right now it's 26 acres of some pretty world-class sport facilities. And when I talk to folks in this town about what I do, my role as executive director, and that I work at the Sportsplex, invariably almost every person has a personal connection to it. And I don't think it's the same thing for the aquatic center or the ice rinks. People volunteer at the Sportsplex. People help build things at the Sportsplex. People compete at the Sportsplex, and people have donated to the Sportsplex. There's a real connection with the community that I don't know of in any other facility of its kind in the province. As I said, the why is important. When we look at the impact that sport and physical activity has on our kids today, it's now more important than ever. We know that kids will be less likely to be involved in alcohol and drugs. Pretty big issue. We know that they're less likely to be involved in antisocial behaviors, less likely to be involved in abusive relationships, more likely to be more successful in school, and it goes on and on and on. So there's a whole host of reasons why it's important. This is probably the best example of the power of sport, is the North American Indigenous Games that happened about 11, 12 years ago, I believe. And I'm from Nanaimo. I've only been here a year and a half, but from what I understand is those games were a catalyst for the Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal communities coming much closer together. And I can't think of anything more special as an outcome from a sport celebration like the North American Indigenous Games. Similar kinds of outcomes are hosted at that one and the recent Summer Games, both hosted at the Sportsplex. Without the facilities and the amenities that place provides, those games wouldn't have come. And oh, by the way, each of those events probably contributed to $1.5 to $2 million worth of economic activity in the community. So a permanent field house has always been part of the vision for those folks who broke ground 25 years ago. This is our current situation. That's the original office building. It's now condemned. It has various mold and other issues, which means we can't occupy it for more than a few hours at a time. It serves as a storage space. This is the facility that we're in now, approximately 270 square feet. We have 4 workstations, very cramped, and sometimes we have the need for 5 or 6 people to be working out of there, which makes things interesting. So this is what we envision the fieldhouse facilities to look like. And we, just about almost exactly a year today, we submitted a grant for over $1 million, and we were successful in getting it. This is we're looking at approximately 5,000 square feet on 2 levels. It would have 4 change rooms, public washrooms, officials change rooms, LGBTQ change rooms, and the rest would be office space and reception area. On the top floor, we're looking at a multi-purpose room with full reception capability and accessible by an elevator. So here's the numbers. Project budget, just under $1.5 million. We've successfully applied for a grant for a little over $1 million, and we're looking to split the difference and have the funds matched, the remaining funds matched by local government to the tune of $194,158. All but $25,000 of that has been secured through the CVRD and North Cowichan. So we're talking about a $1.5 million project. That's direct economic activity that's going to happen in this community. And there's also indirect economic benefits that go with this as well. And that's typically a 1-to-1 ratio. So in total, we're looking at about a $3 million worth of economic activity as a result of the building of this facility. When I looked at and compared the business licenses between Duncan and North Cowichan, it's about a 1-to-2 ratio. So it's not unrealistic to assume that somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million is going to go directly towards Duncan businesses. We're looking at job creation. We talked a little bit about the business activity that's going to come out of this. But I think the ongoing legacy for this project is going to be the opportunities for sport tourism. And let me just take you through some numbers. One of the limitations that we have is without this kind of a facility, we're very limited in the number of tournaments that we can host each year, and typically they're one day, if that. Easily between the months of April and October, we feel that we can host 10 more tournaments, and typically those would be 2 days in duration, and out of the 12 to 16 teams that typically participate in tournaments, probably at least 4 of those would be from out of town. We know that between players and their families, friends who accompany them, there would be approximately 20 people per team. And we know that through Canadian Sport Tourism Association that on average, Canadian sport tourists spend about $100 a day. So when you factor all that together, we're looking at $160,000 a year of economic activity that will be generated as a result of, these are fairly conservative figures. I think we can do much higher than this. But that's about the amount of economic activity on an annual basis that we see would come out of this. I think you would agree that the original concept's physically appealing. And it's something, we see this as a community center for the neighborhood. Something that I think we'd all agree that could be quite valuable. And it would be an opportunity for us to introduce things like Pro D-Day camps, summer camps, after-school programs, and the like. So we're very, 10 minutes, of course, is not really enough time to talk about all the other things that are going on. There's tons of growth and other neat things that are happening there in this past year. But I do want to mention Rowing Canada. We're having conversations with those folks starting on Wednesday to talk about the potential for their needs being matched up with ours, and instead of just a 7,000 square foot facility for them and a 5,000 separate square foot facility for us, the possibility of combining those two projects and at the end of the day having something even bigger and more robust. We are, I think that and I guess my goal and my hope from this presentation is that we can have a conversation at some point. I know that you folks deal with constraints. Budgets are tight. There's a lot of social issues that you're up against. We're looking for 25 grand at the end of the day. We're not necessarily looking for it all at one time. We'd like to have a conversation and talk about how we can fit the City of Duncan and get folks to buy into this project so that everybody in this community can feel like they're part of something and be proud of that association. So that's it for me. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions at this time from Council? Councillor Bruce? Microphone, please.
You've been involved, have you not, in helping to bring the schools onto the facility. Could you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, so starting last year, my relationship with the Sportsplex is a little bit unique. So I actually get paid through an organization called Pacific Sport. Our offices are based in Nanaimo. Pacific Sport has a contract with the Sportsplex to take on the executive director role and administer the facility, bring programs and services. And one of the things that we did in this past year is we had a Friday morning lacrosse opportunity for students from Alexander School. Pacific Sport happened to have 30 lacrosse sticks that were just kind of collecting dust in Nanaimo, brought those down here, made them available to the teachers. We hired a coach to come in, and for a couple hours or an hour's plus each Friday, Alexander kids, 60 kids every week got a lacrosse experience. So that's just one of some of the things. We also have an after-school program that we're going to be kicking off with Alexander students coming up in the springtime as well. Thank you.
Any other questions from council members? No? Okay. Oh, Councillor Brooke.
The rowing club, There's no facility you show for the rowing club in this presentation, though, is there?
No.
So that will be a separate thing, or will be off-site, or?
So rowing has negotiated, my understanding is Rowing Canada has negotiated somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30,000 square feet of space at Artman Park, I believe. And their initial estimate of need was going to be somewhere in the 40,000 square foot range. So anything that can't be accommodated at Artman Park is going to be, or supposed to be, based at the Cowichan Sportsplex.
Thank you.
And so that would be the meetings that you're talking about, them is to
Yes.
start to explore what that would look like, so it may change the building and the structure that you're being presented.
Yeah, or it might just be that we do it in phases where we build our group is very anxious to get going, as you can imagine. We're hoping that, if we can get our facility might be phase one, and it might mean that we have some options towards the end of our construction phase to leave one end of the building open, and phase two be Rowing Canada's facility attached right to it.
And when are you expecting to start the building?
We want to do it. We want to get started this year.
Okay.
We have the funding allows us for something like 6 years before we have to break ground. So we've got tons of time, but like I said, our board is very anxious to get this project, and it's really funny because it's not just our board and staff who are interested in it. We're constantly being asked, since the news has been released, constantly being asked by users who come by, so when's the building going to start? When's the building going to start? So there's some real genuine interest from the community as well. So it's great to see.
Councillor Bruce.
So with Rowing Canada, then that would, just by the name alone, so that brings the feds into it. Does that give you a new pot of gold to?
No, well, the funding that $1 million that we received was the joint federal provincial pot of money. So,
I see.
Yeah, we've already we've tapped them pretty good.
Any further questions from council? Thank you very much for coming in and for your presentation, and we look forward to connecting with you over this year, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think the only thing that I'd like to just add is that I hope that the Sportsplex recognizes, the value that the city does place on it, and the partnerships we've been able to build over the years, and the ongoing commitment that we have in the ways that we can offer to support at this time, and look forward again, as I said, to further discussions about this in the future.
Absolutely.
And 6.1, the report of the Chief Administrative Officer. Mr. DeVertai, you are up.
Thank you, Mayor Staples. Let's bring it up. The Pine Avenue construction is substantially complete now, with only line painting and landscaping remaining on that. One correction to my report there, that for the Government and Kenneth Street intersection improvements, is that the design did actually go to the totem committee already, and did receive a little bit of feedback from that group. Pretty minor tweak perhaps, and there is still going to be some discussions with the immediate neighbors around that before moving ahead this spring. The Cairnsmore roundabout, request for proposals for the engineering design has been prepared and was posted on this past Friday, January 10th. The Duncan Street sidewalk improvements, concept drawings and costs were presented in the capital budget discussions in November, and electrical vehicle charging stations will be included within the west side of Duncan Street. And the environmental design will incorporate accessibility, rainwater, and safety management, as well as crime prevention aspects. And approximately 180 meters as well of water main will be replaced through that project. The sewer was done many years ago, so that's not in need of any tweaking, but we'll be doing some surface changes. It's not a complete repave of the street. It's only portions of the eastern section of the roadway, but definitely some sidewalk improvements through portions of the road. The laneway between 3rd and 4th Street, that is in the draft capital plan for 2020, and the design is underway for the installation of the drainage system and paving for the lane, so that we're ready to go once that's all completed. Canada Avenue, Evans Street sewer main design, staff are reviewing the consultant report to identify the critical sections of sewer main that can be lined. We have, as I previously reported, been indicated that we can repair or at least line some older failing sections of that without having to do too much surface work. So that's very thankful for that. The E.J. Hughes 262 E.J. Hughes, the proposed development for that site, continue to have discussions with the developer. They continue to have challenges securing required parking to replace the 25 stalls on the roadway. And that project won't move forward until they secure those spaces elsewhere in the neighborhood. And I think I mentioned previously that on November 20th, the developer had a public information session attended by approximately 50 people at Sherwood House. And the project itself was well received, although parking again was the primary piece of feedback for that. The Macadam and Rotary Park plan and the Caronsmore neighborhood plans, no major changes to that yet. The draft is expected to be presented to council early this year, so I know that Michelle now back to full-time work starting this week. So, we hope to have some planning technician capacity as well in the department relatively soon, and so should get back on track for those two projects. The development procedures bylaw, no real changes in that due to some of the gaps in the planning capacity that we've had, so we will be back on track with that fairly soon. And no major changes to this Safer Community Plan. We continue to work closely with North Cowichan staff on the implementation of the plan from the highway corridor. The renovations to the safety office are complete. How exactly that space gets utilized is mainly right now a place for coming and going from for the additional presence in the area, but no specific plans. And staff training is continuing. And the group continues to meet and discuss crime and disorder in the issues in the corridor and strategize plans for improvement. And you'll see a few things on the agenda, or at least one on the agenda tonight for consideration that's come forward from the group. The sidewalk snow clearing enforcement, owners and residents are responsible for clearing the sidewalks adjacent to their properties by 10 a.m. each morning. During the recent snowfall, information regarding the snow and ice removal was posted on the city's website and Facebook, and the streets and parks patrollers have been out going along the critical pedestrian corridor, educating owners and residents about the snow clearing requirements, and we thank everyone who did in fact clean the sidewalks in front of their properties, as it makes it a lot easier for those with any mobility challenges to get around. The housing and shelter alternatives, no major changes there. We continue to regularly meet with North Cowichan and BC Housing staff on developing the criteria and discussing potential sites, but nothing definitive there to report just yet. And the water metering project, the rates have been set and meter billing inside the city is commencing. Notices have been sent out identifying and recent ads in the paper identifying some of the changes and just trying to increase the awareness of these the upcoming changes for everybody. And lastly, there will be a budget open house to be held on January 28th from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. at City Hall, and we invite everyone to come out to give us some input on the 2020 5-year financial plan. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Any questions right now from council on the report? Okay.
One question.
Councillor Book.
The Duncan Street sidewalk improvements, the electric vehicle charging stations. So this is just in the concept stage still?
Yes, the final design is not yet complete. We are hoping to move ahead early this year, but what there are a few locations on the west side of the roadway that will be. I believe the intent is to place conduit down the entire length of the west side, so that at any future point we can tap into it to put additional ones in. But at least a couple will be identified, most likely in the area approximate to across from the garage.
So currently, it's just the subsurface stuff that.
Yes, but I would have to confirm, but I believe the intent is within that we should be able to, within our capital plan. We also have, Bernice can correct me if I'm wrong, 26,000 identified within the 2020 capital plan to install, and this would be one of those locations.
Okay, and do you know what the single phase or 3-phase power going in there?
I don't know off the top of my head. I will have to check on that.
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Bruce.
Further to that question from Councillor Brooke, are these? Do people pay for the power on these particular installations, or not?
Staff and council have not really had any discussions on that particular topic going forward. I know that most municipalities on the island, at least, aren't currently charging for this level of charger. I believe at the Cowichan Community Center, they may be now charging for the extremely fast chargers, the phase 1 chargers, I believe they're called, which will charge a car within half an hour. These ones are the sort of 3-hour charge for a vehicle, and they typically, but that seems to be a more and more common discussion as to at what point we'll transition into charging. They're still relatively low cost to the municipalities to do it, and it's often viewed as a bit of an attractant to and a selling feature to those coming downtown from an attractant of customers. So it's certainly a discussion that council can have in the future if you wish, as to whether to transition into charging.
That won't change the in-ground power.
No, they're all installed in the current ones that we have the capabilities of charging if council ever decides to do that, or it would be a relatively easy switchover.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. 7.1, that council support the Safer Working Group's recommendation to install panhandling signage to include the wording, "Panhandling on roadways is unlawful and unsafe. Please consider giving to agencies that help those in need at the following intersections: Trunk Road and the Trans-Canada Highway, Coronation Avenue and Trans-Canada Highway, and Cowichan Way and Trunk Road." Do I have a mover and a seconder for the motion? Discussion on the motion. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A lot of words here, 18 words. How big is this sign going to be? Because there's not much point in having a sign with lettering that is so small that you can't see it. So I'm just questioning how big we're going to end up with. Yeah, picture.
Ms. McWilliam.
Dimensions.
Thank you. Through Mayor Staples to Councillor Duncan, I have been in contact with representatives from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to gain their approval for signage, of course subject to Council's approval of this motion. And my understanding is they could be 600 millimeters by 750 millimeters. So they would exactly reflect the dimensions of the signage that is already there. And that would stop them from blocking any sight lines. So they would go on the back of the signage that is already at the intersection.
I guess I'm hoping they would also be treated with the anti-graffiti coating, because I suspect that they might be subject to damage.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Through Mayor Staples to Councillor Duncan, we are aware that they will likely be subject to some damage, and we'll take that into consideration when we have them fabricated.
Any other questions or Councillor Middlemiss?
Yeah, I'm not strongly for or against, just to bring out some points I brought up before when Inspector Bear brought these up about, I mean, I understand the safety aspect of panhandling in those areas, people are still going to do it. People are still going to give money to people that do it. And by, when we encourage people not to, it just kind of pushes people to steal. Yeah, I mean, I just basically want to bring up those points. Not, like I said, I'm not strongly for or against them. $300 or $400, and then again, just any. There could be some damage to them, and whatnot, and expenses towards fixing them. Kind of some points to bring out.
Councillor Duncan?
Just as a follow-up, I don't recall actually seeing too many people at Coronation and the Trans-Canada. I pretty well drive on that street regularly because I'm down off Coronation at Chesterfield, so I can't remember the last time I actually saw someone standing out there. So I would suggest that we don't sign, if we pass this, that we don't sign that intersection because there's nobody standing out there. I never see them out there. Definitely at Trunk Road and up at Cowichan Way, there's always.
So these 4 intersections were identified by the representatives of the RCMP that are on the Safer Working Group as the 4 main intersections where they encounter issues with panhandling. I do agree with you that I haven't seen as much panhandling going on there at that intersection. However, they did ask for us to list it as the second most prevalent intersection.
Councillor Minimus?
The Trunk Road in Trans-Canada, will that be on both sides? Like with the signs, like how many actual signs would be put up? Do you know?
There would be 2 signs, so one on either side of Trunk Road approaching the highway.
Right. And then one at each of the other locations that were listed? The Coronation and the Cowichan Way? So 4? Like 4 signs in total, or?
I think there would be actually 5 in total. So one at the intersection of Cowichan Way and Trunk, and then one on either direction approaching the highway on Coronation as well. Part of our interest in seeing signs go up in various intersections at the same time is just about educating the public as well. So the more that they see them, hopefully they'll help carry the message.
Any other questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Reports from staff, 8.1, that council approve the agreement with Mark Lakeman Communitecture substantially as attached to the January 20th, 2020 report from the CAO for facilitating community discussions and creating concepts for Whistler Street area and the 85 Station Street Old Red Balloon property, and that the 2020 budget include $50,000 for the community facilitation projects to be funded from prior year's surplus. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Duncan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like the idea of doing something about the Station Street property, but I would really want to have the municipality of North Cowichan participate financially with us to look at the Whistler Street area, because it really is an area where I think both of us have to be at the table. And so I would be more in favor of just at this time doing the Station Street work and contacting North Cowichan and asking them to participate in the Whistler Street area study. I'm going to propose an amendment until here's some more discussion.
Okay. Is there any other councillor who'd like to speak? Councillor Brooke?
It's my understanding that this is just going to be a study. I mean, at such time that we had something concrete that we could take to North Cowichan, I would not be adverse to asking them if they wanted to participate in it. Nonetheless, though, I think it's just too early to say we don't want to do this because we don't know if they're going to join in or not.
I didn't say we don't want to do it. I just want to do the Station Street part. And this is the cost. study.
Yep,
It's 49,000 US dollars.
yep. No, Canadian
No,
dollars.
it's Canadian, yeah.
Right here.
Canadian.
Initial proposal totaled 49,560 in US dollars
The
for both projects.
Yeah, but that was the initial one, sorry, if you may.
Yeah, is your mic on?
Yeah,
No.
I just gotta get
Okay.
closer. Yeah, the
And yours
initial
too.
proposal was in US dollars, but however, they had revised it. So this is like the third revision, and this final one, and actually the second one as well, had been into Canadian dollars, so. Regarding the location, Whistler Street itself, of course, is entirely within the city boundary, so none of that enters into North Cowichan. So depending on the periphery, perhaps on the very northern end of it, and how the discussion evolves, I should say, into how it might the street may interact with the North Cowichan properties that are past Whistler Street. An argument could be made for inclusion of North Cowichan in the discussion. That certainly hadn't come up until today, but it certainly could be done. It would obviously have an impact on timing. Some of the benefit of doing the two projects together, of course, is Mr. Lakeman coming and doing both at the same time on the same weekend. So waiting until you got feedback from North Cowichan would obviously have an impact on the timing. So
Is there a possibility to forward this plan outline to North Cowichan to ask if they would be interested in becoming involved, and at least allow them, the opportunity should they want to do such a thing? Given the safer corridor, I mean, it's not going to hurt anything for us to move this and ask them, and things can always be adapted at that point should they wish to do something more with it or join in. Is that a possibility?
Anything's possibly, Madam Mayor. The impact as well as on the timing. So it depends on how you would wish us to include them within the changes or invitation lists, or how we would go about doing that. So we would likely have, and it's a good point raised by Councillor Duncan, that we would likely have included the neighbors right adjacent that are technically within North Cowichan, because they're directly adjacent to Whistler Street and obviously impacted by the usage of the street in the area. So it's a valid question, but depending on council's prerogative as to whether you want to move ahead or pause, or move ahead and ask North Cowichan for potential partnership, we'll have to. I'll take my direction from what you guys think overall. So
I think it would be great to add into this, or if it has to be part of the motion, or if it can just be staff direction, that that we would like North Cowichan to be aware that this is happening, and should they wish to join into the process, that we could make adaptions accordingly with the consultant to see if that's possible. But that would be, I don't think we have to stop the process since it's already in motion. I think we could just reach out and ask them, send them what we do have, and request their feedback.
I'd like to propose
An amendment to that?
to the
Okay.
motion to include an invitation to North Cowichan to participate financially. I don't want to hold it up,
Yeah.
but as I brought up,
To
Whistler
expand
Street
it,
is
yeah.
an area where we're working with them hand in hand right now. So, my amendment would be that we contact North Cowichan and ask them if they are willing to participate financially in the study.
And are interested in participating, and if so, that what their financial contribution would be. Can we do that as part of the motion?
I think that would be very good.
Okay.
In fact, provide a little bit further information is that we have over the last few days had some conversations with Mr. Lakeman in anticipation, because February 28th will be fast approaching. So we've had a couple of conversations around how the layout of things might work, and agenda type topics and how that flow might work. And one of the topics that had come up was, how do we entice people to come out, right? Like what is that attractant? And oftentimes feeding people during that lunch period is something that entices people to A, come in the first place, but B, also stick around for the afternoon after you've had the morning session, because it's a long day. That perhaps as well could be something that a bit of financial participation by
You could say
that one I'm not saying necessarily that in of itself, because that's not a huge amount, but would assist, because the budget doesn't include that specifically. So
I wasn't sure if Councillor Brooke was seconding that or not.
Seconding your amendment?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, yes, page. Or, sorry, Ms. McWilliam.
May I suggest that you address the motion on the floor, and then we'll deal with the invitation to North Cowichan as a second resolution. That way we'll know what your stance is on whether or not to move forward with the project as it stands, and then the next piece would be moving forward with an invitation.
Okay, is that okay? Okay, so we'll draw the amendment, and so just to the motion, and then Councillor Duncan can make a new motion if he wishes. So all those in favor? Motion carries. Councillor Duncan?
Move that we contact municipality of North Cowichan and ask them if they would like to participate, both financially and with staff input on the proposal that we just voted on.
Do you need any further
texture? Okay.
He's an architecture, so I'm guessing it's a play on that. But I can't pronounce it either. Is that clear? Is there a seconder to that motion? Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. And Operating Reserve Fund Policy Amendment. The Council approve an amendment to the Operating Reserve Policy and add fire inspections as attached to the January 20th, 2020 report of the Director of Finance. I have a mover, seconder. Any discussion on the motion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries. I was wondering on the earlier motion how long something is the old something. That when you live in a town, like the mound is still the mound to me, but I don't know at what year that changes, the old Red Balloon building. 8.3, that council approve Cowichan Music Festival using the $200 bursary for the best in vocal choral in 2020. And I believe this is just a minor change to something we've already passed because they didn't have someone for the original. It was very specific, the original piano. And so this is now, they didn't get someone for piano, so now it's shifting to this. Is that correct? Okay, any discussion? No? Hearing move second. All those in favor? Motion carries. Sidewalk, snow, and ice clearing enforcement policy, that council adopt the sidewalk, snow, and ice clearing enforcement policy is attached to the January 20th, 2020 report from the Director of Corporate Services, and the council adopt the amended bylaw enforcement policy as attached to the January 20th, 2020 report from the Director of Corporate Services. Do I have a mover and a seconder? And Ms. McWilliam, do you want to give a bit of context to this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As it stands now in the city's existing bylaw enforcement policy, our snow and ice clearing enforcement is done on a complaints basis. Like most municipalities, we have a bylaw, a streets and regulation bylaw that puts the onus on sidewalk clearing on the property owner. Our regulation is that property owners have to have their sidewalks cleared by 10 a.m. The courts have consistently found on the side of municipalities whenever someone has had a slip and fall on an uncleared sidewalk, as long as the municipality has a policy, which is considered a policy defense, that they enforce on how they will ensure that property owners have cleared sidewalks. Now, the courts tend to understand that municipalities can't inspect every sidewalk in their jurisdiction every single day that snow falls. So in order to strike a balance between ensuring that the sidewalks are cleared and ensuring that people have access and the right to use those sidewalks during a snow event, but also understanding that we don't have the staff to inspect each and every sidewalk every day, we thought to create a policy that establishes critical pedestrian corridors and gives us responsibility as time permits for inspecting those corridors and ensuring that residents are in fact carrying through with the clearing.
Any questions or discussion from council? Councillor Duncan?
Thank you. So in the past, my recollection is that we had certain streets that were priority for clearing for people to be able to walk. Yes. So how will this impact that? I guess my understanding in the past is like prime example being between the strip between the Silver Bridge and A&W, 4 jurisdictions. who does it. I think typically in the past, we just cleared the sidewalks and then sent out the bills later. Is my memory close or what?
Not exactly.
Okay.
My recollection would be a little bit different. There was one instance within my time here with the city where the city actually, where the snow, I can't remember the specific year, but was so significant that we actually did hire some contractors and went around and actually got her done because it was just over the top. I could have been 2009 or in that ballpark, and it was, so that was a one-off, and I would continue to say that the policy shouldn't really deal with those sort of extreme scenarios where we would do that kind of an emergency situation. You know, a foot of snow in of itself is not, it's not what they're experiencing obviously in back east. What this also doesn't do at this time is deal with areas outside the city's jurisdiction. We'll continue to work with our neighbors and, you know, let them know if we've received a complaint of a particular piece of sidewalk. Let's say it's Cowichan Tribes or North Cowichan, north of the border, where we got a complaint, because oftentimes we'll get complaints about things that are actually not within the city because not everybody's sure where the boundaries are. But or today we had for example, a heads up that there was a street light was hanging down in an unsafe manner. It's not ours to deal with, but we have a responsibility once becoming aware of it to pass on the information. So that's sort of our process on that, and that's different from what we're dealing with here. What you're dealing with here is, and this is the same for relating to Councillor Duncan's question. This map is essentially the same as what had been discussed quite some time ago. What this now does, though, is put some context as to when we go out and give people the heads up and a reminder, hey, you haven't actually dealt with the sidewalk. You really need to do that. And we do take that initial, we actually just sent out this week more of a knocked on people's doors and just let them know and give out information first. But going forward and with some public education in advance, the intent would be from an efficiency perspective, we will likely, and I believe the policy talks to that, just give a notice. Here you go. You have X period of time to deal with it. Please deal with it. But with awareness, it won't become, it'll be less of an issue. You know, perhaps as a new property owner, perhaps moves into the area and doesn't know, that kind of thing. But it's about education first, and so the language is generally fairly soft, but does give the information that it is their responsibility to clear the sidewalk, and there you have it. So
Thank you. Any other questions? I have to say that when Mr. DeVerti and I went out on the day that it snowed a lot, and we drove around the entire city, and I was so impressed with how many people were out clearing their entire neighborhood sidewalks. Particularly people, there was a snowblower guy that we passed, and I would imagine having a snowblower here, it would be fun to go out on those days and clear, you know, literally every single block that you can get to in the day. And I walked for a couple of days. We only have one car with snow tires, so I walked a lot that week. And you can definitely tell there's some hard areas to get through as a pedestrian during that time. And it wasn't just in Duncan, it was in connecting streets, and when you're trying to get across the street and people in strollers trying to hike strollers up different places. And I don't know what the answer is to that. It's not just a city issue. That was in all sorts of places. But again, something that I think everyone can try to work on is to get out and help in those areas, because there's a lot of people walking. More so than, you know, sort of like summertime walking, because not everyone can get out and drive in that weather. So, but overall, the city streets were amazing, and as were the neighborhoods. So, and kudos to all the public works team who were out there at all hours of the night. I ran into those guys a number of times, and their excitement and passion for snow clearing is something that is quite spectacular and deserves an award all on its own. But I just really appreciate how much, I don't know, there's just this kind of excitement about those things when they happen here. I guess because that they don't happen often here. And so I also appreciated that from our own public works, but from the community when we were out overall. That was the feeling of people being out helping each other everywhere. So we have to have the bylaw, I recognize that, and I also, just want to speak to all the people who do get out and help everyone in their neighborhood. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. And now we'll move on to building permits. that council received the summary of building permits, December 2019 report for information only. Move second. Any questions? Do you have a question, Councillor Duncan? Councillor Duncan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It looks like that we had a very successful year. We went from, what, 19 or 20,000 roughly in permits to almost 70,000 in permits. So, pretty successful year around the city. So, I just want to make sure people knew that.
Excellent, thank you. All those in favor? Motion carries. Are there any councillors who would like to give a report? Oh, did I miss one? Oh, I did. I completely missed one. That count 9.1, I'll back up. That council give first three readings to Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 3206/2020, a bylaw to amend the hydrant usage fees, add descriptions to the metered sewer rates, remove the sewer abatement program fee, and relocate the meter reading fee in the bylaw schedule. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Is there any discussion on this? No? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. New business, there's no new business, so reports of mayor and council. Are there any councillors who would like to give a report? Going once, going twice. Councillor Capps?
You're the only one.
You're the only one.
Okay, thank you very much. Just really briefly, that I attended since being appointed in place of Councillor Duncan after your 8 years of service on the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board, which was everyone very much appreciated. Your time there, I got to attend the AGM this past Saturday, and it was really fantastic to get to learn so much about how it operates. It's such a unique model. The regional library whole system is very cool and interesting, and I learned some really cool facts. Like in VIRL in particular, we went from, in 2016, 13% of all the materials they loaned out were ebooks, e-materials, audiobooks, 13%, up to this past year, 2019, it's now 23%. It's jumped by 10%. And there's a whole big accessibility piece that comes along with that too. It was really interesting to learn about, and the challenges of the library getting access to ebooks and stuff. So there's a lot that I'm going to be able to dig in and learn about there. So that's the only thing I've attended lately.
Great. Councillor Duncan?
Councillor Capps, so there's also the soft opening up in Chemainus?
Oh, yeah. I believe they already had their soft opening of the Chemainus branch, but they're doing their grand opening, lots of notice, March 7th. Saturday, March 7th, in Chemainus will have the grand opening for the new branch up there. So it'll be really good. Everyone should come.
Excellent. So it's been a while since we met last. I'm not going to go over everything because there's been a lot going on. A couple of things, though. Over the holidays, Councillors Brooke, Bruce, Newington, and myself were asked on the rainiest day of the year to go and help out up in the Cairnsmore neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
And so we did, and it rained hard that day.
Yep.
Yeah. And the neighborhood, one of the, I guess, successes, I don't know if that's the right word. I'm not sure what the right words are anymore. And it might not be success, actually, is definitely not it's more of an unintended consequence. That makes perfect sense is that the safety corridor is people are being moved along the corridor, and it's working very well, and people still have nowhere to go. And so people are dispersing throughout different neighborhoods, and the Cairnsmore neighborhood being one area. And so we were getting calls from residents who just wanted to know what to do and how to address it. And so we all went out and just did a cleanup with everyone there and talked to the people who were there. And one of the biggest things is to get to know people, talk to them, and then just help out where you can. Help out by cleaning up people that were there, that were camped out in different places up there. And camped out is an exaggeration. People that were taking shelter there during the day because it was pouring rain, came and helped us out and spoke to us, and so just getting the neighborhood to just look at things from maybe a different perspective, which they're very, very open to, and they had people come out in the pouring rain, including a number of small kids, and help out, and it's something that they want to pursue moving forward. And so it was wonderful for everyone who came out during the holiday on the rainiest day that we had to support neighborhoods. And so oftentimes there's ways that we we do things, and I think given the fact that we're a smaller city, we have the ability to do those types of things with our community members, and it means a lot to them and also to us. And it also speaks to the understanding that we're all in this together, and just because we sit around this table is actually more of a reason for us to do what we can when we can, not less of one. And so I just wanted to really acknowledge the councillors that came out and how much that was appreciated, and the neighborhood that reached out. That's how we're going to move through all of these things together, is to connect with each other. So there was that, and Councillor Bruce and Councillor Brooke and myself also went to the seniors' Christmas dinner in January. I did not win anything this year. And we had a great time at that event. And then we went to a 100th birthday that was on the wrong day. So there was no 100th birthday, so we didn't get cake, but we did have a good time talking to everybody about the fact that we were there on the wrong day. And again, it's about that community connection and just remembering to take that time to go out and connect with people, because it does make all the difference in the world. And I know that this council table is very good at that, and I hear about it a lot from people in the community, and so I just want, again, to just say how appreciative everyone is of that. They know we're accessible. And other than that, today I went to the ceremony that Sonia Furstenau brought up, the Good Citizenship ceremony, and Jack Hatton was there to see him receive his award for all of his years of work in starting Duncan Mental Health and work at Providence Farm. And it was an excellent ceremony, and there was other people from the island nominated who received awards today. And there was two young women from a school in Victoria that received awards for their work on shark fin, making sure that shark fins weren't in restaurants. I guess they'd been working on it since they were in grade 8, and they're in grade 12 now. And so they received an award for that. And a man whose name I don't recall at this moment in time, but he was homeless and living in addiction, and overcame all of those things with community support and support from organizations. And he walked across Canada pushing a shopping cart to raise awareness and to raise funds. And so those are just a couple of more inspiring stories that I heard today from people who live on the island and in BC. And I think that is all that I can think of for my update for right now. But it was a very busy time. And the next month, if 2020 is any indication of what's been going on in the next 3 weeks, we're going to have quite the year. I also want to recognize the 2 people who lost their life in Duncan over Christmas holiday. I was only able to attend one of the services. And my heart goes out to the families and the community who are grieving their loss. And I just want to, there was a vigil set up in the park, in Charles Howey Park, and then I noticed that it's still there. And just, again, to take that time to remember to just reach out as much as we always can with kindness, because we don't know what's going on in everyone else's lives, and that type of a tragedy is something that as a community we all feel. And so it's important for all of us to continue to work towards solutions, as Sonia Furstenau said, together, and we are good at doing that here, and we will continue to move forward. But I would like to acknowledge those losses and other losses that have been hit our community over the past month since this, and just before the year ended, and since this new year began. So our hearts go out to all the families that are dealing with those losses. And that is my update for today. A question period. Are there any questions from anyone in the audience? Everyone is attending other meetings tonight. It's very quiet in here today. And I'll make a motion to close, that the meeting be closed to the public under the following sections of the Community Charter to discuss matters related to committee member appointment, Section 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality, or another position appointed by the municipality. Employee relations, section 91C, labor relations or other employee relations, and property lease, section 91E of the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements. If the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. Second? Okay, and we will take 5 minutes and then come back here for closed. Thank you and have a good night.